Hey, what's up guys, Ollie here. So a question which I get asked a lot is how to become a designer, how did I get to where I am? It's not a question that can be easily answered, to be honest. It's not something that just has one answer. There's a lot more to it, it's not as easy as like, you go to school, you learn how to become a designer and that's it, you're a designer. It takes years of work basically. I've been designing for, actually the first time I used Photoshop was nearly 10 years ago now, That's when I first started kind of getting into design and understanding what design was. Yeah, I've been designing for a long time. It's been a long time, and now I've kind of moved away from Photoshop. I use some other apps now and stuff now, but I'll go through a list of some of the other stuff I use nowadays. I never went to design school. I never did sort of any design stuff at school. I didn't even go to university. So everything that I know and everything that I do today is just stuff I've learned from sitting at the computer, to be honest. Now, it's really up to you if you want to do the same. I mean, if you're sort of person that actually prefers to go to school, then I would highly recommend going to school, going to university and learning how to become a designer, because everyone learns differently. There's no one way of learning how to do something. If you think you'll be better at learning how to design by going to school, do that. Definitely do that. So the first thing I'd probably recommend is getting a MacBook. You're probably thinking like, why do you need a MacBook to become a designer? Well, the main reason for getting a MacBook is just because it has all the programs that you need. A lot of the programs that I'm going to list and a lot of the apps I'm going to list are only available on Mac. The great thing about doing design is you don't need a crazy powerful computer to do sort of web and mobile design like I do. You can just pick up a 13-inch MacBook Pro, connect it up to an external display if you want a big display. That's what I do already right now. I just have a 15-inch MacBook, but I connect it up to a big old display. Or you can get an iMac, an iMac is amazing. I started off with an iMac. I just have a MacBook now because it makes it easier to go from the office and home. So yeah, I'd recommend getting a Mac. It can be refurbished, it can be secondhand. You don't have to spend a ton of money, but I definitely recommend getting a Mac. One of the main apps I recommend is Sketch. Sketch is a design tool that's mainly for web design and mobile app design. It's amazing. It's so good for the price. It's always being updated. It's just such a great app. It's very easy to learn. I mean, I probably learned how to use it within a week or two, though I did know how to use Photoshop before, which does help. But I think if you've never used something like that before, you should be able to pick it up within a month or two. It really doesn't take long. Their documentation is absolutely amazing. If you don't know how to do something, you can go through the documentation and you're bound to learn something new. I learn something new about Sketch nearly every week, so a new functionality that I didn't even know was there before. There are tons of tutorials on their website. So if you go to the Sketch website, there are so many tutorials on how to do specific things. There's also obviously tons of tutorials online. It's a well-supported app. I mean, there's so many people that use it nowadays that you can always find how to do something which you may not know how to do already. Some of the other apps I use are SIP. So SIP is a color picker. It's proper awesome app. You can basically pick any colors or whatever, and then you can copy and paste them into Sketch or web design or whatever. It also has like palettes, so you can sort of like create palettes of colors that you like. It's just a great all-around color picking app. Inboard is a sort of inspiration collection app that I use. It's quite an old app now. It hasn't been updated for a while, but I prefer it over things like Pinterest and some other sort of inspiration collection apps, mainly because everything sits locally on your computer, so you can always move your files around, your inspiration around from computer to computer. You're not sort of locked to a service, and obviously it keeps them at high quality. The one thing I don't like about Pinterest is it compresses the images so much. Skyfonts is a font management app. I mainly use that to sync Google Web Fonts because it makes it super easy to sync Google Web Fonts to your desktop. It's free to use, so I definitely recommend getting Skyfonts. And finally, of course, Photoshop and Lightroom. I use Photoshop for photo editing and Lightroom for photo editing. I did used to use Photoshop for web design and app design, but since Sketch has come out and since Sketch has developed so much, Sketch is definitely the better way to do things, I think. But if you prefer Photoshop, stick with Photoshop. I mean, there is no one app that does all. That's the great thing I think about apps. You can always switch between them and use whatever you feel comfortable with. So when it comes to design and stuff, it just takes years and years of patience and work. You don't become a designer overnight, as I mentioned. When I first started designing like websites and apps, I'd say 7 years ago, 8 years ago, my stuff was awful. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. I was kind of just experimenting. I was just looking at other people's design. I thought, I want something similar, so I just did it. I had no idea what I was doing, and that's how you've got to start. There's no way you're going to know everything straight away. I think a lot of people, they want to know as much as possible before they get designing, but I think just getting into it sometimes is so much better than kind of waiting to learn as much as possible. I'd say it took me around 3 or 4 years 3 or 4 years to actually get to a point where I was happy with my work, you know, where I felt proud of my work, where I felt like I wanted to show off to other people, that sort of stuff. Like I said, you know, it just takes a while to get to that sort of level. Before you become a designer, you're most likely looking at other people's design, and you already know what good design is. It's just a matter of creating your own designs as good as that. And, you know, it takes years to do that. And I'd say it took me around 3 or 4 years of full-time designing to sort of get to a level where, you know, I was proud of my work, where I thought, yeah, this is really, really good. It sounds like I'm really up myself, doesn't it? But when you first start designing, it is okay to copy others. I think it's a fantastic way of learning. As long as you don't sort of take that work and publish it as your own, it's a great way to learn how, say, a designer has placed elements where he's placed them. It gives you a good idea of why a designer has used different colours and why colour combinations are really important. You get to see different fonts that they use, different font sizes, and you also get to try out different styles. As you develop as a designer, you'll end up sort of developing your own style, but that does take a long time. You don't sort of develop your own style straight away. Definitely a good idea sort of seeing what styles you like, trying lots of different styles and seeing what you like most. Even I myself copy other designers. I might see a part of a website that I really like, I might see a font that I really like, I might see a colour that I really like. I might end up taking those colours and fonts and those elements and then sort of mix and mashing it up into my own website, which is completely fine to do. Every single designer does it. You know, nothing is rarely ever original. You don't need to always be original. Most of the design that you see today has been done before in some way or another, and that's just the nature of design. Coming up with something original is difficult, and it just doesn't happen often. You know, very few people come up with very original designs. A lot of people say you shouldn't follow trends, but I think that's rubbish. I think it is good to follow trends. Trends are trends for a reason. It means people like them. It means people like a look, a specific look. That's why it's a trend in the first place. If you like a trend, go with it. Naturally, you end up adding your own style to that trend. That's how trends work, you know, they come and go. Not every design you make, you'll fall in love with. I'd say even now, 90% of the stuff I design, I'm not actually 100% happy with, and that just happens. That's natural. You know, you're not going to be happy with every single design. Not being happy with every single design is actually quite a good thing, because it means you're always striving to be better, always striving to do better, which is really important as a designer. You don't want to be stuck in a rut doing the same thing over and over and over again. You know, you always want to be striving to be better. Always have a portfolio. It doesn't have to be a personal website. It can just be a website that, you know, something like Dribbble or Behance, where you can just chuck your work onto. I don't think the website itself actually matters. I think it's the work that matters most. You should always let the work do the talking. The work that you upload should always be your best work. I'd say 95% of the work I do, I never upload. You should always just upload your best work. If you're a web designer, I'd highly recommend learning at least a little bit of HTML and CSS. It just helps you understand how websites work. You know, it helps you understand why something may be done a specific way. You know, knowing a little bit of code will help you go further when it comes to jobs. The two main websites I always go to for inspiration are Dribbble and Behance. You'll find anything and everything on those two websites. Whether you want to be a photographer, whether you want to be a web designer, whether you want to be a logo designer, an illustrator, whatever you want to be, if it's something creative, you'll find it on those websites. It's a great way just to find lots of inspiration. Finally, I think as a designer, you should always sort of expand into other things. You know, even though I specialize in web and mobile design, I love to experiment in other areas, such as products like t-shirts and posters. You know, you may have already seen that I already do that sort of stuff. I have a store where I have bags and MacBook sleeves and desk mats, and these are products that I've designed. I've gone to a manufacturer and been like, look, I want this product to look like this. And even though it's very, very different from designing a website or an app, it's still something that you designed, something that you've put a lot of work into, and it's just so satisfying, you know, expanding into other areas. Wallpapers are something I also enjoy doing. You might have seen that I share wallpapers all the time, wallpapers that I've made as well. You know, it's just great fun making wallpapers that other people will use. You can also do like icon design or logo design. It's just a great way to sort of expand your skills, and instead of designing the same websites and apps every day, you're doing other stuff. You know, it's good fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you found this video helpful as well on how to become a designer. You know, it's great to share sort of my experiences on how I became a designer. So thanks for watching.